Welcome to the Sunday Supplement podcast with me, Tom White, and alongside me for this episode is the Daily Mirror's assistant editor, Darren Lewis, and former Arsenal and Everton striker, Kevin Campbell. We'll be discussing Manchester City's last gasp win over Arsenal in a controversial game at the Emirates, plus that Romelu Lukaku interview and what next for him and Chelsea, and plenty of chat on big wins for Tottenham and West Ham as they chase down the European places. Well, Darren and Kevin, I was going to start by asking about your Christmas and New Year and stuff, but that big news from Chelsea ruined that, so we better get straight into it. It looks like Lukaku not even in the squad. Darren, what do you make of that?
Well, there's no doubt that it hurts Chelsea. They're at their weakest at the moment, 2 wins from their last 6 in the Premier League, and they need their strongest available side. And without him, Liverpool have one less thing to worry about. What I would say in general terms is that I don't really see that he's done that much wrong. He is a player who's always been characterised by his honesty. There is a piece we've done that Oliver Holt has done in the Mail on Sunday today, where he talks about his interview with the Players' Tribune as a younger player. He talks about his background and the poverty that he endured when he was a youngster, how his mother used to mix water with milk to feed the kids, and the impoverished nature of his upbringing, and the fact that he's used the people who used to laugh at him at Chelsea, at West Brom, to drive him to become the footballer that he is now. And he says, Oliver Holt, loyalty in football is a pleasant surprise. It's the exception, not the rule. And that cuts both ways. Chelsea's jet-propelled revolving door for its managers is proof of that. And the key thing in this assessment of the interview that Ollie points out, Lukaku did not say that he was going to agitate for a move away from Stamford Bridge. He did not say that he was going to down tools. He said that he would continue to give everything for Chelsea, and he said he would continue to work with Tuchel to find a solution to his frustration. And bear in mind, the interview was filmed 3 weeks ago. Obviously, since then, he scored 2 goals in as many games, returning to the lineup. And I just think, as far as he is concerned, he characterises what we have had for a long time in football, a problem with big players speaking their minds. As far as he is concerned, as a player, he's always, as I said before, been characterised by his honesty. You bring £100 million player to a football team from a club where he's been playing regularly in a system that's been designed to get the best out of him. Why would you be surprised that he is upset that he isn't playing regularly and that you've got a different system that you are using? There'll be lots of football people, who will say, well, no, you've got to fall into line with what the manager wants. But you know he is a big player. You know what you are getting. You know what he can bring to the team if you play him. And he's frustrated by that. We're journalists, Tom. Do we want players to say anything other than the truth? I don't think we do.
No, from the media side of things, Kevin, we want honesty, and we were actually quite surprised at just how all of that came out there with Romelu Lukaku. But this all started, Kevin, with that interview for Sky in Italy. He voiced his frustration at a formation change by Thomas Tuchel that Darren was talking about there. He suggests that he didn't really want to leave Inter Milan in the first place. He wanted a new contract there instead. So we don't know for definite if that's the reason he's not in the squad today. OK, but it looks like it's all started that way. What did you make of the interview that Lukaku gave, and whose side are you on?
I loved it. I loved the interview. For me, I look at it, Romelu Lukaku has earned being in that position as the main striker at Chelsea. It was a matter of who are Chelsea going to get in. There was talks of Haaland, Lukaku, etc.
Kane, even. Yeah.
Exactly. They've brought Romelu Lukaku in. At Inter Milan, everything was geared around him. I'm sure when he was speaking to Chelsea to come to the football club, how he's going to be played would be one of the highest topics that they speak about. Tuchel convinced him, yeah, we're going to play you a certain way. And that hasn't happened. Now, the fact of the matter is, this interview was 3 weeks ago. Chelsea weren't really going through the trials and tribulations that they're going through at this present moment. He was coming back from a little bit of an injury, etc. And when things are going well, you never hear any dissension or any noise coming out of the football club. Now they've had some indifferent results. All of a sudden, this pops his ugly head up, and it looks as though Romelu Lukaku's trying to unsettle the manager, when really he isn't. That was 3 weeks ago. He's done his job. He's got into the team. He scored a couple of goals. They haven't got the wins but he stuck to his part of the job. I don't think he wants to leave Chelsea. I definitely don't think that. But as a big player for 100 million, if you're not getting the best out of him, he's got the right to say, listen, play me a different way, play me the way that you wanted to get the best out of me. I remember watching him at the start of the season, and they played Arsenal, and he bullied Arsenal, and I said to myself, this Chelsea team are going to be scary when they work out how to get the best out of him. And it just hasn't happened, and I'm sure he's frustrated about it.
The thing is, it's a show of authority from Tuchel. He has to be seen to be taking action over a set of comments from the player that he would, and lots of people would interpret as challenging his authority. But I don't think Lukaku is trying to do that. I just think Lukaku is a guy, you ask him a question, he gives you a straight answer. And just like all of the big players, Ronaldo, De Bruyne, Salah, all of those big players, there are moments when you ask them something, they will tell you, they'll be honest about how they feel. But I don't think that honesty is intended to destabilise the club or undermine the manager. And the bottom line is, in the situation that Chelsea are in right now, they have to win. Today, they have to win. There's no room for manoeuvre. They can't draw. City are over the horizon. They've got to win. Are they better for leaving him out or worse? I would suggest worse.
One thing I would say is, this isn't something that Romelu Lukaku would have mentioned without having a conversation with the manager. I could guarantee...
I think you've spoken to Tuchel. You said all of this to the manager first.
100% they've had... Listen, you're in the training ground. You spend more time at the training ground than anywhere else. This is a one-on-one conversation with, maybe on the training pitch, with the manager and your star striker. You brought me in for 100 million. You said we're going to play a certain way, but you've changed it, etc. So there is a little bit of frustration there for Romelu Lukaku. The fact that he's came out... Remember, this is kind of retrospective. This was done 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, you'd imagine the interview was saved for Christmas, I'd imagine.
But then that says to me that really Chelsea's frustration should be with Sky Italia and not necessarily with the player, because the player has talked about a set of circumstances when he wasn't in the team.
Yes.
Now that he's back in the team, he clearly isn't as unhappy as he was back then. So I don't really see that punishing him is going to actually help. And you were saying when the news broke, Kevin, to me, you think that could cause a problem between the player and the manager, don't you?
It could. Of course it could, because at the end of the day, I understand Thomas Tuchel has to show his power. But if you're going to all of a sudden leave your star striker out, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face a little bit, because you need all your weapons. Look at Manchester City, 11 points clear. This is your next biggest rival who you have to beat at home, and you're leaving your star striker, potentially leaving him out or on the bench. It's not right. It is not right. You've got to play him.
He scored 2 and 2 as well, so that backs up what you're saying. If you're in the dressing room, Kevin, right, whether Lukaku is your friend or not, what would you make of this situation if you're in that dressing room on that training pitch? Yeah,
I think when you're actually in the dressing room as a teammate, and anything like this possibly happens, you actually look at the bigger picture. You look at, he's a good lad. He comes in, he works hard. We were excited when he first came to the club. We're going to get Romelu Lukaku. All of a sudden you think, now we're going to really challenge Manchester City and Liverpool. Now we can take them out. And for whatever reason, it hasn't quite happened. And you understand there's going to be some frustration for the player, because, let's be honest, you have that £100 million price tag on your back. That's a serious weight. He can carry it, but he wants to be the main man, and he's not quite where he wants to be. So you understand the frustration. Possibly don't need it at this point, but you know how things break down. When you're not doing well, these things tend to come out.
Tom, I just look at this now. and I think a lot of people will see this, and there'll obviously be a lot of talk, conjecture over this, and people will characterise Lukaku as a problem. He's not a problem. He's a guy who speaks his mind. He always has been. He hasn't changed overnight. He hasn't become this person that suddenly has started shooting from the hip. He has always been someone who speaks his mind. You know what you're getting when you sign a player. Chelsea assiduously look at the profile of the player as well as his technical and physical attributes and whatever else. So you know what you are getting when you sign Lukaku. So for me, you look at the situation around him as an individual, and you can't really come to any other conclusion but the fact that Chelsea appeared to want to play a different way to the way that they thought they would play when they signed him, and he has not been happy. That could well have changed, as we've been saying, and this could now be a problem more of timing rather than anything to do with him as a person. And you just wonder what it means for the relationship, and you hope that the relationship between him and the manager doesn't break down.
Big test.
I'm fairly certain that it won't break down with him and the players. The players won't see many.
No, the players are going to be fine, but this is a big test of Thomas Tuchel's management style, because we know at Dortmund, he mentioned about Aubameyang in the past when he was at Dortmund, you know, having to manage him and look after him. You know, maybe the same needs to be afforded for Romelu Lukaku.
We're turning our attention to yesterday's action as Manchester City moved 11 points clear at the top of the Premier League with a 2-1 win at Arsenal. Rodri scored an added-time winner for the champions. Right, former Arsenal striker Kevin Campbell, let's start with your former club, because Pep Guardiola did say that Arsenal were the better side, which until the penalty, I think you'd hard to argue against. Do you agree with that? Because Saka did give them the lead. Yeah,
I do agree with that. I think Arsenal really gave the Arsenal faithful a snapshot of possibly what's to come, because going toe-to-toe with the champions, Manchester City have had a real, great record against Arsenal, and Arsenal went for them from the off. Saka with a really good goal. Obviously a penalty decision, which I'm sure we're going to cover, throughout this chat. But Arsenal went toe-to-toe with them. The problem Arsenal had in the second half was the fans were involved in the game. There was a lot of emotion going, and Arsenal just got caught up, as far as I'm concerned. Penalty given, went to VAR, was given. You can argue whether it was or wasn't a penalty. For me, I thought it was a penalty. He's grabbed him in the box, and he's grabbed him too long.
We'll have a look at it actually now. Let's show everyone.
Grabbed him too long.
Talk to you as well, Dan.
So,
what did you think?
As he's going down, that grab, as he's grabbed him, he's going down, and you see his shirt come away. He's grabbed him too long. He needed to let go of him earlier. If he lets go of him earlier, there's potentially not a penalty. But he leaves the referee, as far as I'm concerned, no way to not give it.
Yeah. And there was also the leg out as well, because I wondered if it had been given because his left leg was out. But either way, you do think it was a penalty for the tug either way. And what did you think, Darren?
I totally agree with you. I think it's a penalty. He sticks his leg out and he grabs his shirt. Now, if you don't want to give the referee a decision to make, you don't do either of these things. Why is he grabbing his shirt? You've been a striker. If you're in the box and someone grabs your shirt, you're the first person. Your shirt. So you are the first person to be appealing for that penalty. Yeah. And why is his leg stuck out? There were loads of howls of derision over that decision being given. But for me, Xhaka does two things wrong. People can talk about the theatrics of Silva, but if Xhaka doesn't stick his leg out, if he doesn't grab his shirt, he doesn't give the referee a decision to make.
Bernardo Silva was going on to his weaker foot as well, which the form he's in, it probably wouldn't have mattered, but still. There was a penalty decision at the other end not given. Martin Odegaard went down. What did you think of this one, Kevin? This wasn't given.
I mean, this is a penalty all day long for me. Does the goalkeeper make contact with the ball? No. He makes contact with Martin Odegaard's foot, and for me, that's a penalty, whichever way you look at it. But Arsenal weren't given. I think this is the frustration that is with the Arsenal fans. The referee, Steve Atwood, never even went and had a look at it. He never even had a look at the VAR. And then, obviously, for Silva's one, he went and had a look at it. So what's the difference? There has to be some consistency.
No, Kevin, look, we've got the papers all in front of us here. Look, and they're all across all of these papers.
Yeah.
A hand of Rod on the back page of the Sunday Mirror. It's on the top of the Sun here. Gunners' fear over pen calls. All of the papers. To Pep, Happy New Year, love VAR on the back page of the People.
Bit of a cheeky one, that one.
But, you know, the interesting thing about yesterday, as you rightly say, if you are going to look at the VAR for the second one, then you should be looking at the VAR for the first.
Yes.
Now, we actually disagree on the first, but that's immaterial. The fact is that the referee has to go and look at the monitor. And, you know, we talk about VAR as if it's this complex, technological, difficult thing. It's a guy with a video screen, basically pressing rewind.
Yes.
Why on earth can a guy not look at that and make a good decision? Now, I've got a couple of questions with this one. The VAR yesterday was Jared Gillett. Jared Gillett is the guy who was the VAR for West Ham's game against Brighton. In that game, he gave an offside decision against West Ham that was neither clear nor obvious. And again, yesterday, why does he not instruct Stuart Atwell, at the very least, to make his own decision by going to the monitor? I was at the game, I could see the frustration of the Arsenal fans, which was utterly justified, because in that moment, whether you agree or disagree, the referee has to do his job. And Stuart Atwell's making too many big unilateral decisions that required the viewing of a monitor at the side of the pitch that is there to help him. I want to show you a piece in the Telegraph today by Keith Hackett. Used to be the head of referees at the PGMOL, and he's basically saying, look, Atwell allowed too many things in this game to go beyond him. And he uses a very strong word in this piece, and I'm going to ascribe it to him rather than use it myself. Look at it down the middle there. Refs these days are lazy. They think if I don't give it, VAR will pull me out of the mire. These are his words. And so referees and all the people who might have an issue with it, they're the words of Keith Hackett, but he does make a point that will resonate with a lot of people. There are too many moments this season and last season where referees have left the big calls to people with the video screen instead of making them themselves. And I think as far as the game yesterday was concerned, there were points at which it could have spiraled out of control. And I think that Stuart Atwell, look, for my money, and I'll be very frank here, I think refereeing in this country is neither diverse. We have very few black referees. It's something I've been very, very forthright on, because I think it's something we need to confront. We've got one demographic, the same old people making the same old mistakes, and this is what time and again we are left with. And until we have a root and branch review of our refereeing in this country, until we don't have people like Stuart Atwell, who has been, listen, he was fast-tracked into the Premier League. He gave a ghost goal in favour in 2008. The ball had gone wide of the post, and he gave that ghost goal. In 2012, he was suspended because he'd made a lot of mistakes. But time and again, that type of referee is being given the big games, and it's leaving other fans of football clubs frustrated because they are making calls that people simply cannot comprehend.
In fairness, though, Kevin, did he get it right with Gabriel's red card? And secondly, I suppose from your point of view, if you're one of his teammates, how furious are you? His first yellow was either for dissent or for scuffing up the penalty spot. We don't know which. And that was the second 2 minutes later.
Yeah, look, that is... I understand Gabriel getting sent off. Gabriel, like I say, Arsenal got caught up in the emotion of the game, and Gabriel seems to be an emotional player. He's an aggressive centre-back, which we love at Arsenal. But after you've just been booked, you've got to show some composure. You've got to be able to put the brakes on and not commit that foul, because sometimes you leave the referee with no choice. If he'd have stood still and the player had turned into him, then fair enough, you know, he probably wouldn't have got a yellow card. But the fact of the matter is he did make real contact with Jesus, and it is another yellow card. Arsenal shot themselves in the foot in the end, solely because maybe they're not mature enough to be able to handle the crowd and the occasion at that time. But as I said, it's a snapshot of hopefully what's to come.
I'm going to say, yeah, that's a really good point. I think Arsenal before yesterday had won 14 out of 19 games in all competitions. But I think that was their best performance of the season by a mile.
Yeah, true.
I think it was full of character, quality. There are a number of players who were big performances from, obviously Ramsdale's always been consistent. White, Tomiyasu looks a fantastic signing. I think Spurs must look at him and think, why didn't we get him? A fabulous player. Gabriel Martinelli, I know he missed a sitter, but he was excellent on the day. Bukayo Saka's going to become a superstar. So many good performances.
Don't forget Thomas Partey. He was immense.
In midfield.
He was
Even
immense.
Xhaka.
Yeah,
in general,
Xhaka had a good
in
game.
the first
Yeah,
as
he did.
Best performance of the season, and I think it gives Arsenal a lot of cause for optimism going forward.
Yeah, add Ramsdale to that, and actually their recruitment has really improved in the last couple of windows. We've talked about Arsenal a lot there, but Manchester City, they won in stoppage time to go 11 points clear. Rodri's goal, is that the sign of champions that they just kept going? I know it was against 10 men, but they got that winner.
They remind me of the old Manchester United sides. Lots of people would use all sorts of phrases to describe them, but the fact is that they made their own luck, and that's exactly what Rodri did yesterday. Kept going to the wire, fabulous finish, Kevin.
Look, for me, they take risks.
Yeah.
Arsenal go down to 10 men. Rodri's a holding midfielder. All of a sudden, Gundogan comes on the pitch and he's starting to get in the box. Rodri's getting in the box. And you see what it means to the team. They're built to be winners. That's the bottom line. Hostile environment against a really good team who, for most of the game, outplayed them. But for the last little part of the game where they get back into it, you just knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time. And that's what champions do. They get over the line.
Well, let's speak to someone else who is built to be a winner. We can get more on that game now and speak to Jonathan Northcroft from the Sunday Times. Good morning to you, Jonathan, and Happy New Year. You were at the Emirates yesterday.
You loved that.
Yeah,
I see the smile there.
That's your biggest smile of the year so far, that one. How much did Arsenal impress you despite defeat?
Yeah, it was one of the best performances, not just of Arsenal's season, I think, but actually one of the best performances I've seen against Manchester City by anyone in the Guardiola. They're being cut open in a way that you don't see happen to City very often. They were outplayed. And I echo what Kevin was saying, actually. What for Arsenal being a slightly young, naive team, maybe, and being caught up in the emotion, I think they'd have gone and seen that game home. Watch fact refereeing, of course, as well. But Arsenal's big takeaway, I think, from the game is that they have arrived. They're arriving at their Arteta. They deserve to be up in the top four again, and if they keep that level of performance, they can stay there in places.
And we've been talking about refereeing yesterday. Just give us your thoughts on refereeing at the moment and yesterday.
I mean, the discussion, lads, I enjoyed it, and I'd echo a lot of the things said. I mean, it strikes me that we accept referees making mistakes. The things that I have trouble with, there's a lack of consistency and a lack of control in the game. And that was, unfortunately, the story of Stuart Albert's. With the two penalty incidents, they were both marginal, both actually penalties. But the difficulty is one's reviewed, one isn't. After, well, theatrically waved claims away. So actually wrong. It's not good seeing a referee get it wrong, but they only reviewed one. And then there's the issue of control. The way the players were behaving around him showed they didn't feel he was in the game. The sending off, well, the Premier League say it was consent. The first thing. And Arsenal have said in the game that they're confused by that. Gabriel only, a couple of polite comments to Atwell, asking why one was a penalty and one wasn't, and that led him to be consent. So that suggests the referee not really being enjoying spoke back to and controlling players. Then there were other odd, like Atwell getting in the way of Martinelli about the open goal and just sort of bad positioning. So I understand why Arsenal feel aggrieved by the performance. But I guess that comes back to emotion. You've got to take that out of the game and not let it affect you if it did affect them.
Right, Jonathan, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go to a break and we're going to come back to you after. We're just going to try and refresh the connection. We can't hear him just quite as perfectly as we'd like to. So stay where you are, Jonathan. We'll try and sort that out. Right, we were just before the break talking to Jonathan Northcroft from the Sunday Times. I think we've sorted out the connection to him. So, Jonathan, I'll just throw straight to Darren because Darren has got another point about referees he wants to ask you.
Yeah, we were just talking about the referees. I was talking about Stuart Atwell. We know he was demoted from the select list in 2012 and the goal score and whatnot. And here was another controversial game that he was involved in. And you were talking about both yesterday and the general issue with referees in English football.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I know from the refereeing side how much they're trying to put into getting it right, but you have to say the standard doesn't seem to improve year on year. I heard your comments, Dan, about the system, maybe it being a closed shop for the same old guys. There does seem to be an element of that where certain referees, we've seen them, they make mistakes. They never seem to be knocked off the roster. I don't necessarily want to name them, but I think we've all got ideas who they might be, and there's a lack of sort of new blood coming through. And the advent of VAR doesn't really seem to have given us any more confidence in refereeing, and the standard of how VAR is being used doesn't seem to be much better than is on the pitch. I'd certainly like a bit more openness about the process, how you become a top referee, and I'd definitely like to see greater diversity and more former professionals, if that's possible, becoming referees, because I do think that's a sort of missing link as well in the whole thing.
Well, it doesn't seem to be a missing link for Manchester City. We thought it might be a striker. That doesn't seem to be the case. 11 points clear now, and they've won 11 games in a row. Darren likened them to what Manchester United were like. They just kept going until the end under Sir Alex Ferguson. Is this Manchester City side as good a side as you've seen in the Premier League?
They are, and it's a good comparison, you know, the Manchester United of the Fergie era, because that struck me yesterday, that it was a slightly ugly performance. It was a performance where they tried their usual sort of passing patterns and tricks, and they didn't work, so they did something else. You know, by the end, they were throwing a centre-back up into the box and getting a knockdown midfielder arriving, which is a sort of old-school English goal, and they were willing. I think Guardiola's City have evolved, and they're willing to play in different ways now in order to get the job done. They were kind of similar against Brentford in midweek. It wasn't a fantastic performance, but they got the job done. And in an era where we've got a very good Liverpool team and a good Chelsea team, to be 11 points ahead at this stage of the season, which I think is a record or near a record, it just speaks not just of their quality, but of that mentality now, that relentlessness. And they will go on and continue winning, I'm sure, and continue to be incredibly frustrating for everybody else to try and catch and beat.
Jonathan, for all that, I know we were in the same press box yesterday, your match report taken up by a lot of what was good about Arsenal. I was hugely impressed by them. Just tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, they've arrived under Arteta. I think probably the removal of Aubameyang was the last stage in him, you know, creating his own team. But what you see now is a fearless, energetic side that's on the same page. And they took on City. They went toe to toe in a way that very few teams have been able to do. They cut them open. The high pressing was very good. They play out from the back, and they've got players with personality. You know, from Thomas Partey, who bossed that midfield, to Ramsdale, who's just the most watchable goalkeeper I think I've ever seen. Bukayo Saka, who's so old before his years. You know, Smith Rowe coming off the bench. They've got character now. They've got energy. They look like they deserve their place in the top four. And they're the most convincing Arsenal I think we've seen, certainly since Wenger departed, with so much ahead of them, because they're very young and they will learn, and they'll learn from experiences like yesterday.
Wasn't it someone who said personality goes a long way?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, fair point. Romelu Lukaku, Jonathan. OK, right, so he gave that interview to Sky in Italy. We've heard Thomas Tuchel's response to that, and we are told that he's not even in the squad for this match today. What's your take on this situation?
Yeah, I heard you discussing Oliver Holt's piece, and first of all, from a Lukaku point of view, I'd echo that, because what we want is honesty. We don't want the kind of bland nonsense that we hear so often now, or see on social media from players in their camps. So this is a top player that's been open about his situation. I don't think he should be vilified for it. I am surprised, in all honesty, that he was so blunt, because he'll know the ramifications. But honesty is to be encouraged. And what strikes me is this becomes now an issue. This moves on, I think, from Romelu Lukaku to become a management issue for Thomas Tuchel. He's decided to discipline him, it would appear, by leaving him out of the squad. But that doesn't solve the problem. The problem is, first of all, how do you use this top striker that you've bought? And secondly, how do you manage the environment? It does strike me that Tuchel had problems at PSG with star players. He ended up saying that, I felt like the Minister for Sport, was his quote. He said, I felt like I had to manage all these kind of star players and entourages. Well, that's part of football. He's going to have to find a way to get the best out of Lukaku, who I don't think is a difficult person to manage, by the way. I think he's just a winner, and he's got that top player's mentality. So yeah, leave him out of the squad today, but going forward, Tuchel's going to need to build bridges with Lukaku. And we all thought it was a dream return. It's for Lukaku. It's surprising it's come to this quite so quickly.
Yeah, Kevin was nodding along to pretty much all of your answer there, Jonathan. Great to speak to you. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, Davinson Sanchez scored a 96th-minute winner for Tottenham as they won 1-0 at Watford to move to within 2 points of Arsenal in fourth. And crucially, Tottenham have 2 games in hand on their North London rivals. That doesn't sound good for former Arsenal striker Kevin Campbell, but they did leave it late, Tottenham, didn't they? Unbeaten in 8 under Conte.
Yeah, it seems as though they're getting themselves together. Fair play. They've had a little mini break. You know, they've had some serious COVID issues and injuries, etc. But after that break, they've come back and they've been flying, to be honest with you. They've been doing really well. So, you know, don't like the fact that they're breathing down Arsenal's neck. But winning games is all important, and it doesn't matter when you win them. The key is to win them. So
See, the timing of this goal for me is crucial, because in the past, Spurs teams probably would have surrendered, given up the ghost. But now under Conte, they keep going all the way to the end. Sanchez, one of a number of players in the Spurs team, stroke squad, who lots of people thought really had reached the end of the road. But there are a number of them, him, Ben Davies, Harry Winks, fringe players who have looked better under Conte. Now, the interesting thing is about what he's going to do next, because he said, look, I finished my evaluation of the squad. I know which players I want to keep, which players I want to maybe move on, because he wants to bring his own players in. And when you look at where they're positioned, given their nightmare start to the season, first 3-4 months of the season, they look very, very strong to take advantage. They win one of their games in hand, they move into 4th place. And suddenly they're masters of their own destiny. So I think yesterday's win, obviously the 3 points welcome, but the manner of it as well suggests that the character of the Tottenham team is starting to change. Well,
the North London derby coming up is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, big one, huge one as ever. But back to your special subject today, Darren, and that's VAR. What did you think of João Pedro? Do you think he was unlucky not to be given this?
Yeah, I did. I did think he was unlucky, and I think, again, you know, we kind of overcomplicate, like I said, VAR when you look at this, and some people would say it's subjective.
It's a penalty. It's a penalty. Look, the goalkeeper gets a little bit, but he gets most of the man. It's a penalty.
And that's not you talking as an ex-striker there. That did look like quite a clear penalty.
Yeah.
But what about Harry Kane, though? A tussle with him and Messina in the box as well. What did you think about this, Kevin? I guess with a striker's hat on.
Yeah, look.
Shirt, Paul.
That is... You're fighting. Harry Kane's using his strength. That's not a penalty. That's just 2 players trying to fight for position. But if you notice, he takes his hand off at the last second, because Harry Kane probably would have went down, and if he goes down, that makes the referee have to make a decision. So,
if you were Kane, would you have gone down?
If you go, the problem is, no, if you go down and his hands, no, because you're using so much strength, you're not going to go down. But if he keeps holding you as you turn, then you go down, pretty much like Silva. Yeah. But Harry Kane realised, as soon as he's taken his hand off, smart striker, he stayed on his feet, because he would have got the booking probably if he'd have gone down.
No, I thought it was.
I thought it was.
Yeah, I thought it was. We disagree on that one, but Darren, I know that you've got a lot to say about this when it comes to Watford. Emmanuel Dennis isn't going to the Africa Cup of Nations, all right? And it's something we were talking about a lot before going on air. He's going to be staying with Watford rather than going to this major tournament with his country. What are your strong feelings on it?
We talked about this when Jules was here a couple of weeks ago, you know, and my view then was the same as it is now, that in English football, even within our industry, I think we've got to change this narrative of the AFCON being a nuisance. We've got to change the way we approach, even the way we discuss it with managers, about the AFCON being this annoying thing that comes along mid-season. Yes, it might be frustrating for those managers to lose high-caliber players, but when you sign African players, you know that they will want to go and represent their clubs. And we would all go ballistic if a club were to deny an English player the chance to play in a crucial World Cup qualifier, a Nations League game. But yet we have a situation where this boy, Emmanuel Dennis, Adrian Kajumba's done a piece for the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday today, and he's saying in this piece, look, Claudio declares the dispute over. Well, that's all very well for Claudio Ranieri to do. But at the centre of this is a boy who's been denied the chance to go and represent his country at the highest level. And Nigeria have been very scathing about this. They say that Watford threatened. And again, these are key words that I am not using myself. I'm ascribing to the people who are using these words. Egwevin used that word to describe the conversations that they've had to do everything they could to keep him at the club. And I feel sympathy with him because clearly the player has not wanted to cause a problem. But I think in general terms, English clubs continuing to put pressure or to use their influence, they pay the players' wages, they should have the right to do this or that. If we wouldn't want it for English players, we should not want it for African players. And if you don't want African players to go to represent their countries, don't sign them. It's very simple.
Simple as that. He should be allowed to go. And he's in the squad. He's been named in the squad. Shouldn't there be some hierarchical thing that he has to go?
But it was the provisional squad, wasn't it? It hadn't been cut down.
Right.
And the key thing is this. Look, Ranieri was saying, and the questioning of Ranieri, really good because, you know, people are saying to him, look, it isn't just about what did or didn't happen, loopholes, or they didn't send the email in time and all of that nonsense. The fact is, it's a general lack of respect for African football and for the AFCON. I know we've got AFCON on Sky Sports over the next month or so. How will it feel for Dennis to be sitting at home watching players play in his position when he should have been there?
Especially if he's taken off after 46 minutes.
Well, that's the point I was just going to touch on. You know,
I am going to get you started.
He's been one of Watford's best players, best performing players. He's been
high striker in the Premier League.
I mean, he's been excellent. Now, the fact of the matter is, he cannot go and represent his country in a fantastic tournament, and he gets taken off 1 minute into the second half. Why? Because maybe it's because the football club are flexing their muscle to put him in his place. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to me. Dennis, if he gets called up into the full team, should be allowed to go. Come on now.
Your former strike partner, Ian Wright, said exactly what Darren said, that the tournament is disrespected.
Yes.
I mean, this kind of proof of that, would you say?
Another bit of proof. Right, he was right. Darren's right. It doesn't get the respect it deserves. Now, you look at this Copa America, you look at the Euros, and I know they're in different times, but all the players are allowed to go. But the AFCON is always there. Is always some controversy. And why? Why is there controversy? There shouldn't be any. He should be allowed to go.
And
It's come around every season, Tom. We know that is going to be the case, that midway through the season, players are going to want to go. It should not even be a question of whether a player would choose to stay with their club or choose to go to the AFCON. If they are called up, they should be allowed to go. We shouldn't be talking about emails not being sent, requests not being sent. And they're all excuses. The bottom line is that if you don't allow a footballer to go and represent his country, you're disrespecting the footballer and you're disrespecting the country and the competition as well.
Kevin Campbell and Darren Lewis still here. How impressed have you been with Thomas Frank and Brentford so far this season?
I've been very impressed with Brentford. Obviously, looking at them in the Championship, they've taken some pain because there was opportunities for them to get out of the Championship previously. But I think the timing has been right. They've got that squad together, and it's stronger. They're hardened, and they came into the Premier League with a freshness that a lot of people didn't expect, and they're giving a lot of the big boys major trouble, especially at their home ground. So brilliant performances. I like the look of a lot of their players. I think the front two, Ivan Toney, there's been a lot of talk about him. Bueno up top there as well. I think his pace has surprised a lot of defenders. But Pontus Janssens and Ayer, etc. But I think the midfield and the way that they play, there's a few interchangeable pieces in the midfield that they don't get enough credit for, because they do mix it in there. They could put their foot in. All of them could play, and I think they're having a really good season.
Do you like the fact that Ivan Toney is a proper striker, and also, I remember when Peterborough sold him. I remember Darren McAntony. You might remember as well, Darren McAntony saying they are getting him for a bargain. At Peterborough, we need that money, all right, but he's worth much more than that. Yeah. And I can assure you, Brentford will make a fortune if and when he leaves. Actually, he's proving to be right at the moment.
Of course he is. Look, an old-school-looking number 9 who can hold the ball up at the top end of the pitch, who could bring other players into play and generally make players around him better. They're worth their weight in gold. And it will take a hell of a transfer fee to prize him away from Brentford. But yeah, the longer Brentford stay in the Premier League, I think his price is only going to go up.
And if you look at it, Darren, they're 14th, so 20 points from 18 games, 9 points clear of the relegation zone, although a lot of clubs have games in hand and stuff like that. What have you liked about them this season?
I think the most important person at the football club is Thomas Frank. He's got a clarity of tactics. He's a fantastic manager. I think the heartbreak and the disappointments they've had in the past with the playoffs have actually helped to kind of solidify the club. There is a unity there. Mm-hmm. He's very clear, and to be fair, the whole model is very well defined in terms of the profile of the player that they like to sign. I know they've just signed Lossell, the goalkeeper from Midtjylland. He's 32. He's got experience in the Premier League with Huddersfield. In English football with Huddersfield, and they're all players who buy into what Thomas Frank wants to do at the club. Mm-hmm. I think all of the individual players that you mentioned are all important characters as well in terms of where the club are going. And I think they'll stay up this season because I don't think they're a club given to panic. They're a club that supports their manager. They've got belief in the players, and the belief is reciprocated by the squad as well. I think they're going to have a really good second half to the season.
Well, we can hear now from Diogo Jota, who has spoken to Jamie Redknapp ahead of the game.
Diogo, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hello. Good, you?
Yeah, all good. Tough week. Obviously, the result against Leicester was a bit of a surprise for everyone. The manager said that this is a bit of a moment where if you play like that, you're not going to be able to win the title. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's just letting us know, basically. We already basically know that as well. We were not really ourselves. When they got 1-0 up, everything got harder and harder, and we couldn't find the equalizer. It's time to learn from that, but most important is to recover, because we still have to play in basically 3 days.
I want to talk about your form. You seem a very humble guy, but would it be fair to say you're in the form of your life right now?
I always find that kind of questions hard to answer. I've been asked that before when I first joined Liverpool, I think last year. So it's always hard to say. Sometimes, some games you are just in the right place at the right time. Each game is a new challenge, and you need to be always up to your best to be able to perform at your highest level.
I watched you a lot at Wolves, and there were times when you played wide, sometimes you played as a striker. How have you become so good at this sort of false nine or number 9 role that you are now?
I always try to do what the manager asks me to do, basically. Like you said, at Wolves, we sometimes played with 3 up front. I was on the left because we had the proper main striker in Raul. When we played with 2, I was up front. It depends on what the manager asks me to do. I try to adapt. I think that's one of my main characteristics. I played 10 years as left midfielder in a 4-3-3. Then I was physicality, I was developing, and I started arriving to the box more often, scoring goals. Then I went basically to number 10 position, and then, this guy can score goals, so put him up front. That was basically how it was.
If you look at the title race right now, Diogo, it looks to me as there's 3 runners, obviously yourself, Man City. Do you put Chelsea, or they're a little bit behind, you still put them as runners?
At the moment, City is already with a proper gap, let's say like that, so it's up to us to try to close that gap, and now we match each other. If Manchester City was watching this, obviously they are happy with this, how this happened, so we both lost points now, and now we face each other, so that means that at least one of us is going to lose points again. Well, it will be a very tough game. Like you said, teams have been playing, we have injuries, they have injuries, we have COVID cases, they have COVID cases, so we just need to be at our best possible. And I know that it's going to be an easy game, and the details can decide it once more. I hope we can perform at our best level, because if we do that, I know we are able to go there and win the game.
Right, OK, so Diogo Jota there. Let's talk more Liverpool now, because we can speak to James Pearce, who covers the club for The Athletic. James, good morning to you. No Jurgen Klopp on the touchline today. Suspected positive COVID test is what we were saying last night. Do you know any more about it? And I assume he can still communicate with the bench.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, he will, I'm sure, be in communication with the bench over the course of the game, and we'll have some input. But far from ideal preparations. Thankfully, we understand his symptoms are mild. He's feeling fine in himself, and the good news is he does have a very trusted lieutenant in Pep Lijnders, who usually does take on media duties for domestic cup games, certainly commands the respect of the players, and is heavily involved on the tactical side of things. So I don't think there should be too much upheaval just because Klopp isn't physically there today.
James, lots of shock and awe from Liverpool so far this season, but did that performance against Leicester shock you?
It really did, yeah. I certainly didn't see it coming. I think everything approaching that game suggested it should have been a relatively straightforward night for Jurgen Klopp's side. When you think Jurgen Klopp has banged the drum consistently, hasn't he, about player welfare and spacing out gaps between games, and most of his star men had a week to prepare themselves. They should have been fresh, they should have been sharp, yet the reality was they were incredibly lethargic and careless, and so many sloppy mistakes that they ultimately paid the price for. Yes, it could have been different if Mo Salah tucks away that penalty, if Sadio Mane had converted that glorious chance he had at 0-0. But it was a very un-Liverpool-like performance, and especially when you throw into the mix the fact that Leicester had so many players missing and had conceded 6 against Man City 48 hours earlier. It felt like an absolute hammer blow in the context of the season.
Due to these COVID cases that we know are going around at the club, do we expect big changes from Liverpool today in terms of the starting lineup?
Well, his options are pretty limited, really. When you think that he obviously revealed on Friday that there was three new cases within the squad. There's also 3 members of staff, as well as Klopp, who are self-isolating at the minute. Thiago, who's only recently come back from a second bout of COVID, he's got a hip injury, so he won't be involved. Klopp was saying he didn't expect Origi or Minamino to be available for this one. So it'll largely be a case of placing his trust in most of those players who were responsible for that defeat at Leicester to put things right, because maybe Naby Keita could come into the midfield, but apart from that, it'll be much the same again.
James, talk to us about Salah and Mane, because today's the last game before they head off to the AFCON. What provision has Jurgen Klopp made to compensate for their absence over the next few weeks?
Well, I think the good news for Liverpool, first of all, is the fact that during that month, when they're without Mane and Salah, they only played 2 Premier League games, and those 2 are Brentford and Palace. So I think that kind of softens the blow slightly. But the reality is the options in their absence are pretty limited. You obviously Jamie Redknapp there speaking. Diogo Jota, who's been an absolute revelation this season, and what a signing he's proved to be since he arrived from Wolves, and big responsibility on his shoulders. Only Mo Salah has scored more Premier League goals than him so far this season, so Liverpool needed a lot more from him over the course of this month of January. And of course Roberto Firmino recently come back to fitness. Then you're looking at Minamino and Origi, who have recently had knocks. They need to get themselves back fit and back contributing. And then Oxlade-Chamberlain, who has actually had a decent run of form in the last couple of months. Mainly has played his football in midfield this season, but he can play in the front 3. So yeah, as well as those 2 Premier League games, obviously got the 2-legged Carabao Cup semi and the FA Cup tie against Shrewsbury to negotiate without them. But the big thing is to just try and ensure that when Salah and Mane come back, that they're still competing, hopefully, on all fronts.
James, very quickly, could they change the way that they play to accommodate the other players you've just mentioned a second ago?
I don't really see the style changing too much. I think I think the brand of the football is pretty constant under Jurgen Klopp. I don't see a sudden kind of shift away. There isn't really players there who you would say that they could change to a plan B, if you like. I think these signings that have been brought in, some of the even people like Minamino say, who hasn't had a big impact so far, he's been brought to fit this style. So I don't necessarily see it changing. I think thankfully someone like Minamino is versatile. He can play across the front 3 like Jota. So and that versatility is obviously going to be crucial when you're without two of your star men during a crunch month.
Right, Kevin Campbell, let's bring you in now on this. What have you made of Aston Villa since Steven Gerrard took over?
I think Steven Gerrard's done a really good job. Him and Gary McAllister have come down from obviously being at Rangers. And I think you get a sense of the direction that Aston Villa are going in now. They know what they want. You could see they've put a lot of work in on the training ground, and they've got the team playing, they've got the team committed, they've got them on the front foot, which I think is really important for Steven Gerrard, and they're getting results. And they've given Manchester City a scare. They've played everybody tough, and some of the results haven't gone their way, but they've played everybody tough. So today, they'll probably look at this and think that this is a game where we can get 3 points.
Kevin, is it different when you're playing for someone that you idolised as a player? Because I think I see a real dynamism about the Villa players playing for him.
Respect. The respect is there. It's a bit like, when I was at Arsenal, George Graham. George Graham was a member of the double winning team. His aura and his knowledge of the club is second to none. But when you look at Steven Gerrard, you know what type of quality player he was. Cut his teeth at Rangers, and now here he is, and he's coaching us as players. It really does put a pep in your step.
Yeah, I think so too, Tom, because there's almost still a connection between him and the dressing room as well. He's still young enough to understand what the current players are going through. He's in touch with all of the things that matter to the current generation of players.
Definitely.
And then you translate that, then you bolt onto that his consistency of tactics, team selection, the way he improved players up in Scotland.
I think you got to add Gary McAllister in there as well, because Gary Mack is a perfect foil for Steven Gerrard. Gary Mack is very vocal. His knowledge is second to none. So, as a tandem, those two, I think they're going to do a great job at Villa. Someone
who has really shone is young Jacob Ramsey. How happy are you, Kevin, to see players come through the system, just like, it would have happened to you, and, of course, your son Tyrese as well has come through a youth system as well. being given that chance is all these young players are asking, and then it's up to you to take it. He's taken it.
He's more than taken it. I think he's one of quite a few at Aston Villa who are knocking on that door. Trust me, they've got some real talent at Aston Villa. He's come through and done fantastically well. But you need a manager who's going to be able to, one, trust you, two, give you the opportunity, and three, if you do the business, keep you there. And it seems to be working for Steven Gerrard there. But watch, there are more to come from Aston Villa.
He does have experience of working with younger players at Liverpool.
Yes.
Where they empowered him to kind of shape the young futures at that club, and you can see the benefits that the way that some of those young players have benefited and the club have benefited since then. So it's no surprise to see a Jacob Ramsey come through. I'd expect more players to come through that the ranks at Aston Villa while he is at the club.
I guess it brought through Nathan Patterson at Rangers as well, amongst others too. In terms of the January transfer window, do you expect Villa to be active?
Yes, very active. Again, he's got a clear idea of what he wants to do. He's been clear about saying that ahead of the transfer window as well. He's ambitious. He's not going to rest on his laurels in terms of what he's done already. He wants to bring in the support up front, the defensive stability. Mings not being available means they're light at centre half. I think he'll address that in the window. And I think he'll bring something more in midfield as well.
Does that make you work harder if you're already part of that squad and you want to remain part of that squad?
As soon as the manager changes and you know Steven Gerrard's coming, you better pull your socks up. Seriously, because you know when a new manager comes in, he has to assess it very quickly, but you know January window is coming. So you've got to perform. And Steven Gerrard knows exactly what he wants.
Right, OK, so we've still got Darren and Kevin with us for the next hour. Kevin, we've got to start with that Manuel Lanzini goal. Magnificent, wasn't it?
He scores some special goals, this young man, doesn't he? He's a scorer of great goals. I think he's kind of been a victim of the success of West Ham, to be honest, where he hasn't been in and around the team. But what an absolute fantastic goal. And, you know, them getting back on track, I think it's important. West Ham getting back on track. They've had their blip. And now, you know, London derby, I mean, look at that. That's outstanding. That really is outstanding. The technique, and he's hit it so early. Oh, absolutely brilliant. No goalkeeper stopping that.
It's the fact that he's
only scored 5 times so far this season for West Ham because he's got so much talent. You would imagine he'd be filling his boots on a far more regular basis. I know you're going to be doing your transfer show with Carvey and the guys over the next month or so. I expect you to be talking a lot about West Ham, because I think this next few weeks should shape their season. If they get the striker support in for Antonio, they're going to be in really good shape. If they get another defender in too, they've been hugely unlucky with injuries so far this season. Ogbonna out, Zuma out. Yeah. They've had full-backs out during at one point or another. But if David Moyes can get players in... You know, we spent a long time talking about West Ham as a club, not just a side, a club battling relegation. And he's changed the mentality of that club, a little bit like Conte's threatening to do with Spurs at the moment. And now we take for granted that they're up there challenging for a place in the Champions League. It's
done a great job
in a way.
David Moyes done a great job.
Great job. And I think if they can just now get the players in that will back up that front line. There's a piece in one of the papers today suggesting he's having a look at the Swiss striker Breel Mbolo. I would imagine there are a number of players of that calibre, maybe even higher, that he's looking at. But if they can get that support in for Antonio up front so that when he doesn't play, or if he has a dip in form, they can still score goals, they've got a really promising second.
Still in Europe as well, aren't they, Darren?
Absolutely.
Still in Europe.
So they're the Europa League. I got ahead of myself there.
Yeah, so if you're saying that if they have a good January, they can absolutely at least challenge, if not get into the top 4. Do you agree with that, Kevin?
Yeah, they're challengers for sure. For sure, they're challengers. They're challengers now.
Yeah.
I just think that the squad are a little bit light in key positions, like a Mikel Antonio, where if he goes off the boil, West Ham tend to struggle a little bit with that pace and power. They do have great players. I think Bowen's had a good season, Barama's a good player, etc. But when Mikel Antonio's on fire, I think he's the catalyst for West Ham.
I assume your whole career you were an out-and-out striker. what is it like seeing Mikel Antonio, who started as a right winger, he's been on the left wing, he's been right back, he's been right wing back, and now he seems to be an out-and-out striker. How hard is that?
Well, at Arsenal, I played striker, I played wide left, I played wide right. Even at Everton, for one game, I played centre midfield.
Okay.
The key to Mikel Antonio is he's got all these experiences of being in different positions. Now he's found a spot and he's found a manager who gets the best out of him as a striker. And the great thing about Mikel Antonio is mobile enough. He can run channels. He's strong enough to hold it up. He's smart enough to be able to hunt the space in behind. So he's a defender's nightmare. He really is. So all of these strings to his bow just makes him a harder player to deal with.
I'm glad you said that, because there is so much more to him than just those two elements that were being discussed before. He does have so many different attributes to his game. He's very clever, very canny striker, and that's the kind of striker they're going to need to bring in to either play alongside. I mean, you play with Righty, for goodness sake. You know, you would one of the best alongside you.
One of the best ever.
It would be a dream for West Ham to get somebody anywhere near that calibre to play alongside Antonio. But if they were to get somebody who can really push him, really get him looking over his shoulder thinking, I've got a Kevin Campbell behind me, you know, then suddenly they're in really good shape.
And Bolo's a decent player as well. I know they're being linked. He's a decent player.
Yeah, so when I said that you were always an out-and-out striker, that was complete nonsense. You played everywhere.
I played everywhere, yeah.
What do you think of Mikel Antonio's goal celebration? Let's show you it and see if this was right up your street.
Listen, I love his celebrations. I love it. Absolutely. You know what? This is what makes football fun. For fans.
Personality.
It's a personality, it's a bit of character. Yeah, right. It's a bit of character.
Well, you did the bogle.
Yeah, we used to do all the different dances, myself and Righty and everyone like that. But it's a bit of fun. You score, you want to have a bit of fun. And it's a connection to our background as well, you know, Jamaican and the streets and stuff like that. So it's great to see people having fun.
The only problem was I had to explain to my kids what Mortal Kombat was.
Oh, really?
I felt very old.
What about Palace then? What have you seen under Patrick Vieira that is different, maybe better, than last season under Roy Hodgson?
More goals, more creativity, more entertaining to watch, more fluidity. There is so much more to this Palace side than just Wilfred Zaha. Now, that's not to say that Zaha isn't quite something, because we know that at times he's carried Crystal Palace on his back and he's been a fabulous servant for the club. But when you look at some of these young players in this Palace side and the direction that Patrick Vieira is taking them in, you realise that they did the right thing, not just by bringing him in, but by backing him during those early weeks of the season where some people were panicking and suggesting maybe they'd made a bit of a mistake. He's going to be a fabulous manager for that club, and it wouldn't be a surprise to me if a bigger club at some stage were to have a little look at him.
I think Palace are another club that have got a lot of young, impressive, talented youngsters who are looking to really push in. Elise is a really good player. Done his apprenticeship sort of in the Championship last season. He's coming through, scoring goals. He's looking really good for Crystal Palace. And that's down to Patrick Vieira and his backroom team. They're getting it right.
Yeah, Mark Guay here at centre-half, a really good acquisition for the club. Odson Edouard, fantastic signing from Scotland, come down, scored yesterday, as we know, and I think once he gets his feet under the table, he'll score a lot more goals. And I just think when you look at Palace now, they're a better watch. You can't not credit Roy Hodgson for the job he did laying the foundations at the football club and giving them that stability, if you like. They do still have a few players that are going to be out of contract at the end of the season. It'll be interesting to see what happens with them. But as a club, you can see the direction that they're going in. You can see what Vieira is trying to do. You've got to give credit to Steve Parish and all of the people at the club, Mark Bright and those guys behind the scenes. They knew what they wanted to do. They knew how they wanted to do it. It didn't work, of course, when they tried to do it before. But I think this is very different.
Because they always bring through their own youngsters. There's some there now, but you look back to Zaha, who's still there, Victor Moses, Nathaniel Klein, quite a few players that they've brought through, but they also have a real good eye for players from the EFL and with Edouard in Scotland as well. And their recruitment has been very, very impressive in that regard. But Vieira, though, wasn't... They lost, I know, but Vieira was very unhappy with the referee at full time. I think we could... Yeah, we can probably show you. I mean, look at this. I mean, that's Vieira as a player, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, you know...
Sorry. I love Rice is coming in there, so like, come on, Pat, and he said, no, I'll talk to you later.
And Rice is like, OK.
Look, there's a lot at stake, and, you know, these are highly charged games, especially London derbies, really highly charged, and it means a lot. Patrick Vieira's not just going to, you know, sit on his hands on the sideline and not expect to back his players. I think if he feels the referee gets it wrong, he's going to go and have a word.
Do you know, Kevin, the thing about Patrick is he is a leader. He was a leader when he played. He was a leader at one of the biggest clubs, not just in the Premier League, but in Europe. And he performed that role with distinction. He's been a leader, not just at Palace, but even when he was at City and they saw the work and the potential in him, and then he obviously went out to the MLS, and he's been in France as well. He's always been a leader. He's always been someone not only can speak his mind, but articulate himself extremely well. And it's funny, I saw him when Palace played Arsenal earlier this season, and the thing that struck me actually was his patience, because at that time,
he's calm, isn't he?
He's very calm at a time when Palace was very much a work in progress. You know, the final ball was a bit frustrating. He could easily be forgiven for kind of tearing his hair out, but he knew A, what he was trying to do, and B, where these players would eventually go with a bit of an arm around his shoulder and a calm head. He is not given to getting in referees' faces very often. So you can understand just how intense the situation must have been to get him doing that. And I think, as far as he is concerned, I don't need to say any more about the refereeing situation, because as you know, my feelings, I think they're a bit desperate at the moment. And I think, you know, I don't just want to say that to be negative for the sake of it. We do need to have a proper conversation about where we're going with refereeing and the closed shop that it remains in this country.
100%.
And the fact that very often they are tending to defend the indefensible instead of being honest and open about the mistakes that are made. But I think as far as Palace are concerned, Vieira, he is really doing a terrific job in terms of leading them.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there a similarity that what you were saying about Steven Gerrard there? It sounded like he walked into that dressing room at Aston Villa and everyone went, wow. Do you think the same thing might have happened at Palace with Vieira?
I do. And I think it was more desperate at Crystal Palace because of the amount of players that were out of contract and what needed to be done at the football club. I look at it from the start of the season. I looked at Palace before Vieira was appointed, and I said, I fear for Palace. I really do, because you've got a whole squad of players out of contract. So whoever's going to come in has to do a really good job recruiting. I think he's done great getting Conor Gallagher into the football club. I think he's been one of the stars of the Premier League. And obviously kept Zaha and added to it. So the Palace players must be thinking, look at what a manager is. Brilliant. Again, pull your socks up and looking forward to getting on the training pitch, because not only is he teaching, he's transferring that knowledge to these players. I think is key to Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I mean, they did lose yesterday, but they are 11th in the table and have been very, very good. So, Kevin, Darren, thank you very much. Even if you miss any of today's shows, you can listen to the Sunday Supplement podcast. Download that now and listen wherever you are.